currently holds a share of education in science with a focus on early childhood education at the University of Cologne. Her research concentrates on early childhood pedagogy with particular strength in the theory development in early childhood education, ethical and ecological aspects of education and care, cultural, aesthetics and natures of education in childhood, and much more. So maybe from my side this is enough for you to hear, and now I hand over to Ursula Stenger, please.
Thank you for the introduction and the invitation to this conference. My topic today is the transformation of world relations in the Anthropocene as an educational challenge, and I added a subtitle, Living, Learning and Thinking with Water. And a short overview about my presentation. I start with phenomenological and other approaches with Peluchon, and I talk about water relations, and I talk about phenomenological feminist posthumanist research on water, about place-based research, some short points on methodological approaches, and then I work out dimensions of transforming world water relations in daycare centers, 3 studies with water landscapes, and come to the conclusion. So I start with Peluchon and her phenomenology of the living. I work here with 2 books. The one is Crossing the Impossible, Hope in a Times of a Climate Catastrophe. This is my translation from the German book. It's in French in the original. And she started one word from her: global warming confronts us with something that is too big for us, because it's not only our survival that is at stake, but also the future of humanity and other species. And I make here a short excursion and remember to statement of the German Meteorological and Physical Association some days ago. They had a big conference about extreme weather, and they announced that 3 degree plus in 2000, that's wrong, in 2050 is possible. What does it mean? This means 2 degree plus would mean 1/3 of the Earth is inhabitable. And if you really try to imagine this, it's nearly impossible to imagine what this means. That this could happen. And this would be that in Europe we have 7 degrees plus. The plants we are gardening will not be able to grow in that. We have water crisis and so on. And so my question is, what does this mean for us as educational scientists? And I use these thoughts of Peluchon because she describes in this book how she comes in the situation not only for her as an individual, but this collective catastrophe and this feeling which comes from this. And she describes how she was going on. However, the transformation of world relations, we heard much about this, e.g. from separation of humans and the world, and our developmental model is profound and frightening. If we realize the global consequences of violence, of exploitation, of the nature of humans and of all bodies, crossing this void, this nothingness, as an individual and collective existential experience, losing the illusion that previous responses are sufficient, that everything will be good. What does it mean, and what does it how is it possible to go through this nothingness and to come to a hope which is not an idealistic optimism, but a kind of question: how can we co-create, individual and collective, new meaningful horizons for coexistence on Earth, including the common good and regeneration, so the psyche and structures interact. What could be the concerns for well-being, solidarity, justice as nourishment? She sees this all as nourishment, because we do not only nourish us with water and food, but also with such things as well-being of ourselves and of others, and of maybe cultural experiences. And we should focus what nourishes us really in life, so that we can focus in a different way. And citation: hope is the expectation of the impossible, profound change. Connectedness, interdependence, love of life as experience, value and motor for acceptance of the unchangeable and courage to change. So we will not, it will not be possible to make everything good. We have to adapt to some processes, but we can change much. We can change our orientation, and this can we learn from Pellichon's thoughts. So, what are the phenomenological conclusions from these thoughts? What does it mean to take seriously the corporeality of the subject, the materiality of its existence, its immersion in the elements of water and air, its need for food, and to care for the health of earth and the being that inhabit? So, the water, the air, and the food is not only the condition, and our pedagogical task is something else. It's the condition of life, so it's also a topic in education, a fundamental topic, because we don't have it, life is not possible. What does it mean for phenomenological research to take this dimension into account? And how can profound transformations of world relations be realized, researched, and accompanied as an educational task? I choose the example of world relations to water, starting with the experience. What are water relations? We come from our mother's amniotic fluid. Drinking water is essential for life, refreshing, vitalizing. We are part of a constant water cycle on Earth, our blue planet. Swimming in rivers, lakes, and oceans is a unique relationship with the world. Water carries us, cradles us, takes us with the flow, opens up wide horizons for away from the land. Water is a fundamental condition of our life and our lifestyles. Scientific and technical objectification has led to abstract relationships with water. Water became a resource for human and economic use, sold and fought over. Another perspective we can get with environmental literacy. Environmental literacy work with the scientific knowledge and carries out stories so that we can imagine better how it would be in 20 or 30 years. And I mention here only one, there are a lot, and they help really to imagine this. Maya Lunde, The End of the Ocean. So, we look at the facts global of the water crisis. Droughts, floods, pollution of water and oceans, with no or only temporary access to drinking water, loss of ecosystems. Germany is one of the countries with the highest water losses worldwide. You don't see it just right now, but it is. Since 20,000, an additional 2.5 cubic kilometer per year we're losing. This makes 50 cubic kilometer in 20 years. The reason: reduced rainfall due to climate change, increased condensation, rising temperatures, overuse for agriculture and industry, and change in land use, e.g. soil sealing. How can we transform destructive global relationships with water? I come to research approaches and start with post-human feminist phenomenology. A book from Neymanis, Bodies of Water, and another book, Hydrofeminist Thinking with Oceans. Planetary, I summarize them on one slide. They are really interesting, I can recommend them. Planetary water and water systems are wounded in many ways. Citation: humans are bodies of water on land. We took the water inside us when in the evolution came to this, that we are land, terrestrial beings. Human beings including about 75% water. Post-humanistic phenomenological explorations of water relations and experiences with more than human worlds, which are animals, plants, but also water, air, and so on, realize and foster reconnections with our embodied existence with water as a becoming together. Water experiences and relations are also political, cultural, historical, material, discursive, ethical, and bodily. Guiding values and beliefs lead to perceptions, priorities, and practices relating to water, e.g. consumption, mobility, and water forms back human life worlds as landscapes, agriculture, and so on. Western idea of autonomy and human-centeredness, we hear about in the presentation of Bista, ignores complex relationships with other life forms, impacting violent, colonial, capitalist, unjust relations and water crisis. So the question is how to realize and develop alternative ontological relations to water, with e.g., and these are some perspectives which these two books suggest: indigenous perspectives, because we are all part of one earth, of this blue planet, with arts, with embodied practice, mindfulness, compassion, to perceive really hurtful or caring impacts of our actions, of our relations with the world. So I come to the next. It's a place-based research, and I think it's quite important. I start with Birgit Althan's affective spaces. We understand affective spaces as fabrics of relations of more than human worlds, where non-human actors such as landscapes, air, atmosphere, things, and so on, play an active role, and which result from an ordinary, lived and experienced being in relation. Citation. And I quote on other topics of research of this place-based pedagogy. Why is it important? They focus on configuring new places of a sustainable common world, creating new spaces of feeling at home with Dune, also in urban areas with Malone et al., as chicken hospitals in a daycare center with Bilgi, and with Smith as place-based education, learning to be where we are. And learning to be where we are seems to sound very simple, but it's not simple, because our being is a mobility. We live our life with a great focus on mobility. It's very attractive to travel around the world, to see other cultures and so on. But this lifestyle is not really sustainable, and so the question, how can we learn to be where we are and connect with what is here, is a great educational question. How can we re-establish new connections and relations with the landscape, but also the culture and the things, the material and discursive aspects of local lives? Some short focus on methodologies. It's a mix of phenomenological and post-qualitative. And I show here only two examples to mention two possibilities to do this research. One example is the book of Malone and others, Walking with Glacier. You see a glacier here, wilding ecologies. And what does it mean? It means that a group of wild pedagogy persons, 15 persons, walk in an area of a melting glacier, which is thousands of years old and which will soon never be here. So it makes a difference to be in these beautiful rooms. I have been here many times. It's every time very beautiful with these flowers and with this everything, but it's if we are here, we think maybe it will be the same in 2 and 10 and 20 years. But when you are outside, when you really see how the glacier is melting and how it changes the whole landscape and the destruction with it, you can feel it in another way. So living and listening to melting glaciers and to produce texts or products which are rich of this experience which you make. This is important. And this is quite narrow to the phenomenological issue, because phenomenology tries to understand how experience are constituted. And they make experience. They make experience physical, sensual, and emotional connections with a living glacier. Appreciation, wonder, loss, touch, grief, and gratitude, collective responsibility. Those are some emotions and reactions which are inside this rich book. It's also a rethinking of time and space, because the glacier has another age, another timeline as a human life. So learning from glaciers for new horizons and alliances could be taken by this environmental novella. Another example is in this book from Oktay Bilgi and others. It's about an article of Helsa Lanz, Fabian Bedorf and me about the flood disaster in Western Germany, an event involving children, families, daycare centers, floods of water and mud, spaces, animals and objects. We did this research because Fabian Bedorf worked in a kindergarten which was flooded, and Helsa Lanz lived in a house which was flooded, and so we just started at that moment, and we tried to understand what happens when such a tremendous flood, more than 180 persons died in that flood here in Western Germany, and what happens and how does it affect persons. And we speak with the children, with the teacher, with the head teacher, and we make photos. We see how the village, how the kindergarten was changed from this, and how they work with trauma from this, and how they give solidarity, acting. And what was fascinating for me is that all people with whom we spoke were enormously fascinating by the flood. Even people who lost persons, who lost their house, who lost the loving letters from their life, say, and you can hear it in their voices, the energy and the fascinating of this tremendous water. And they say, I must go there, I must to see it, to hear it, to listen to it, even if it's frightening. Even a year ago, they have fear when it starts rain, the children. But this fascinating is here. And so I try to understand what is this relation with water. And this is just an example. And I come to my topic, how can we transform world relations to water through education? And this, I present you three studies which are connected and also which work different. And this is only a starting point for research interests of me and my team. So these are three multidisciplinary pedagogical environmental studies with water landscapes and more than humans in the Anthropocene. They are connected to ocean literacy for the UNESCO and UN Ocean Decade. And they work different. You see here the study of Santoro and Cenetti, who work with kindergartens in the Venetian lagoon. And Santoro is a marine scientist and coordinator of UNESCO program of marine education. And Michaela Cenetti is a professor of didactic with a phenomenological background at the University of Bologna. And so they have this connection of education and marine scientists and biology. And Elin Odegaard and et al., they work at the Norwegian coast, near Bergen, a pedagogy of emergent literacy, narrative accounts of children's exploration in a coastal landscape of Western Norway. You see her book. And the third is Jane White and Williams and Martin, worrying with children and water in ECE, also in early childhood education and care, exploring pedagogical frames, effects from actions for climate change. So their thought is located in New Zealand. We connected with Maori. Also, you see here Williams. I'm allowed to show the photo of her presentation in Brighton. And they have this connection with indigenous knowledge and roots and educational practice. And I give you a short insight in these three projects. So, the first, transforming water relations as an educational challenge in the Anthropocene. Starting from the Venetian lagoon to understand different dimensions of experiences. They are connected with outdoor education. This means they try to offer immersive, multisensoric and interdependent experiences with water and its inhabitants. To reconnect, to wander, to enjoy, or to be irritated by these relations. Ocean literacy means to ask and to learn about these relations with the oceans and the interdependence life forms in a changing world. They explore, read, imagine, and articulate bodily experiences with play, art, and stories. But also they discover the diversity and they try to avoid ocean blindness, to see and understand the significance of oceans and biodiversity for the habitability of the earth and human life. And there's also the ontological ethical dimension to encourage transformation, deep understanding of the strong reciprocal connection between humans, also children's in that case, and the ocean and terrestrial worlds. So to feel water as an integral part of our existence, to live this connection and to take responsibility for this, supported by teachers, including parents, intergenerational and communal networks. They try to co-create cultures of care and responsibility that value the beauty and life-giving power of the common water landscape lagoon. This is the first. The pictures are from the article of Santoro Genetti I mentioned here. And another kind of research and pedagogical development you see here in the landscape-based approach, early childhood education and art in Norway. It's they name it emergent ocean literacy. So Odegaard et al. Made this project, this art-based project with 3 kindergartens at the coast, also involving intergenerational engagement in a community boathouse, because they attend how the fisher repair their stuff and talk to them about their experience. They also were on the coast, like in the other project, many times, and here supported by an art pedagogue. Citation: literacies of the sea, which they want to develop, reflect an embodied sense of a place, painting to the significance of nature, materiality and interaction with the sea. So how can this experience be expressed? That's their question. How can meaningful local aesthetic experience emerge? Also knowledge about the inhabitants of this ocean, that's their question. And they mention also event in the past when a whale with lots of plastic inside was found there years before, and people remember this. And in the project itself, the group was at the coast and find many dead birds at the coast. And the teacher said, had they a flu? Are they dangerous for the children? Please don't touch them, of course. And the children ask, have they enough to eat? Or one girl says, the birds might have eaten plastic just like the whale. And one girl lays flowers on the dead bird. Unfortunately, the picture is not good enough. You can see the flowers, but maybe somebody who sits in front. So this was just a gesture of grieving, which makes the connectedness of the girl tangible, experiential. And with Wittek et al., it could be a starting point for another kind of exploration, because with Latour it could be a matter of concern, because the girl was worried at that moment, but they make this picture and they wrote her sentence, but they don't follow up, because they have planned an art workshop and so on. And maybe these moments could be some starting points for some other processes. And the third study which I want to mention, because it's quite different, they make a walking with. It's an article here from which I took it, transforming water relations through framing, worrying with children and water. So the researcher walked with the children and the teacher at the water, and every time when one child to understand the embodied learning focus, because they looked not for the actions at first, but they looked on the situations when one child or more children express their feelings, their worries about the water. And then they look at the respondings and framings of the teacher, how and if they take this serious, they take serious these worries, and if how they frame it. And they frame it in a different way, because they say, if we do this, maybe collect the waste, then positive, the animals can live better here. So this was a negative and positive framing. And this, they all wrote these kinds of framings. And then in the third step, they looked what are the effects of different framings for the action of the children. Do they collect the waste if the teacher says it in this way, or is another framing more helpful to engage children in this furthermore? Because they want an involved engagement, and the result of the study is that positive framings, which show the relevance and the impacts of local children-connected life worlds, connected with opportunities to act, have the most positive, biggest effect on engagement. But also negative consequences can mobilize when action is possible. So they try with a study and also with a pedagogical situation to undergo the knowledge-behavior gap in taking focus on the emotions of the children and the framings and the possibilities which emerge from that. So empathic, affective connections with water can establish a sense of belonging. This is a part of the curriculum in New Zealand, Te Wareki, which has relations also to Maori culture, to feel as part of collective, cultured, embedded ecologies of water landscapes, which are also often engaged with Maoris living with embodied water spirits and traditions. This due to feelings, related meanings, which not burden, and this is very interesting, not burden personal responsibility, but involve in relational engagement. Because an argument in the discussion of sustainable education is often we should not give the responsibility to the children, that they should be the change agents. We should not give the responsibility to the children as individuals, because they will have strong fear or powerless feelings from that. And here the focus is more on the cultural collective dimension, and this helps the children to come in a more active relation and not feel as powerless. So, what are the conclusions from my considerations or my readings of these studies? What phenomenological perspectives can we find on living, learning and thinking with water? Phenomenology can help us to perceive, and this is important, to realize and transform the complexity of what happens in our experience with local water landscapes, and to give voice to these experiences in their bodily affective dimensions. And before I mention these dimensions, I want to emphasize this part of realizing, because I think most problems, or most big problems, is that we don't really realize the situation, and phenomenology can contribute to this challenge, because phenomenology describes experiences and possible experiences, and can make it more effective or clear, not only in a cognitive way, but to imagine the experience in which we are and which could be possible. So I think from when I summarize these 3 studies, I see an ontological dimension as a becoming together with the water, and not only use the water, but building a relation to water, not only be in a distance to water, but to feel the reciprocity and to feel as part of a bigger place, a bigger space, a landscape. I mentioned the ontological dimension, but it's also necessary, and here is a difference between the project in the Venetian lagoon and Norway, because in Venezia, because of the marine scientists, they have really a profound and differentiated knowledge about this interconnectedness with other living beings. And I think about an experience which I lay on this to understand more what could be the task of this knowledge, because we have much knowledge but it helps us not to realize. How should this knowledge be that it helps us to realize? That we know better how these plants or animals live, which are directly in my surrounding, just here, not everywhere. And to understand this, and to understand also the impacts of our actions and the reaction of the environment on our actions, though the impacts should be known better. And also the ethical considerations and choices which are behind the actions, the respect, justice, or gratitude for the water, connected with different possible common futures. So behind every educational study, behind every knowledge are ethical considerations, because we focus on a special question and we don't focus on another question because we have made a choice. And this ethical and future-oriented dimension is very important, and also acting in a caring way and working on changing structures in communities. So how can the foundation of our existence as bodies of water with all other living beings, be conceived in such a way, that's my question, that the significance of this experience in all its scope becomes a topic of concern on different levels of researching and teaching, transforming attitudes, world relations in cooperation with other disciplines, be it ocean science, biology, or art. If we regard the right to a clean environment as a human right, and this says the International Courtyard just some weeks ago, and measures that serve this purpose are binding on states under international law. The question is what contribution we as scientists or phenomenologists can make. It would also be important to reflect on the stabilization of world relations through science. So our epistemology, which is behind that. I come to my further conclusions. It's a starting project just in this week, so I can't tell you any results. I can only tell you the place where I'm just now. The project is named from the water, Changing Education Sustainably, or Changing Bildung Sustainably, with Miriam Eble and Sumir Beya Sarikaya. We ask about transformative exploration of sustainable education by combining water experience and water knowledge, issues of justice and early childhood education. The project contributes to the reflection and transformation of existing educational concepts for responsible coexistence with local planetary water landscapes and daycare centers. So this is our idea, and we are connecting with several daycare centers, and we want to explore these different kinds of relations of children, teacher, parents, and researchers. And my last slide, the world calls us, we heard just now. What does it mean? I argue with the Common World Research Collective. It means that we have to learn to become with the world, with mutual care. So it's, I think it's not only our personal development, but it's connected with the development of the world. And the flourishing of the world and the human beings can only be together and interconnected with mutual care. And I think also connecting with Cornelia Dietrich, she's here and she had a big conference on care. I think care is a fundamental dimension of education and of Bildung, because care relates us with the world in an ethical way. So in an end it can relate us in a mutual way. And I point out children's books about water warrior. It's about a woman who is a water activist from indigenous people. And here is a quotation from her. I can feel the water, I can hear the water, I can sense the water. You can do all of that too, if you listen to it. And they made Mother Earth walks with water to, as a kind of activism, to show people how important water is. That's the fundamentation of our life. And our relation to water can be an example for changing relations. And I end with a quote of Robin Wall-Kimmerer from her book Sweetgrass. Knowing that you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street into a sacred bond. Thank you.